second or two, I just like to make sure that it is alive and well before we dive into the material, because if you miss it, or if I screw up the technology, that's not good for anybody. So let's make sure that things are rocking and rolling. And it looks like we are. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the beautiful, sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have helped to represent thousands, literally thousands of good people facing criminal charges, navigate through the criminal justice system. Unfortunately, sometimes good people just have bumps in the road. We've all been there. And what we're passionate about doing is helping them get things back on track. And I will tell you this, over my time in practice, my team, we have seen some seriously problematic things with our justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We have prosecutors behaving poorly. We have judges who are not particularly interested in doing justice. And it all starts with the politicians, the people who write the rules and pass the laws that we're supposed to follow, but then sometimes themselves they skirt around the rules when it suits them. And so what we want to do on this program is hold them accountable, shine the big, beautiful spotlight of transparency and accountability down upon the system with the hopes that maybe we can help clean some of it up. And so if you're not a regular of the program, we've been really spending a lot of time lately talking about the election. Election 2020, still ongoing. This is the legal battle of, I think, ever of the world history. This is the big prize, fighting for the presidency. And what we see here is Donald Trump and his team being very aggressive in multiple different states across the country. Today was a very, very active day in terms of campaign legal news. We have Donald Trump, who released a speech today on YouTube and on Facebook that has garnered millions of views already. He just released it today. We have a couple clips. We want to break down what he said, because a 45-minute speech was all about the election, all about election and voter fraud. He addressed a lot in it, and we want to break some of that down for you. We also had the Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood team. They had a press conference today in Atlanta. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We have Ted Cruz, who came out with a new letter to the Supreme Court urging them to pick up the issue in Pennsylvania. Currently, right now, we have Rudy Giuliani and his team. They're over in, I think, in Michigan. So a lot of activity going on, and we want to break it down for you, so we're glad that you are here. If you're not a regular of the program, now's a great time to invite you to subscribe, because we go live at this time every day of the week. We want to have you here and a part of the conversation. As a reminder, all of the slides that I'm about to show you that we're about to go through, those are going to be available in our Discord chat server. So at the end of the program, we send those slides over to Discord. The link is in the description. You can join us there. It's our persistent chat. And as I'm going through the next little bit, we're going to cover some slides and some information. We're going to cover the news and the legal topics. But if you have a super chat or a question that you would like to send our direction, please feel free to send those throughout the presentation. Miss Faith is screenshotting those and sending them to me. I will address them at the end of the program so that they are not missed. So feel free to get in there and start chatting it up. All right, so let's dive into the material. So as we talked about, a lot of activity from Team Trump all around the United States today. As I mentioned, literally right now, if you're not watching this program, well, the only explanation could be that you're watching Rudy Giuliani. Rudy Giuliani and his team, you can see here on this slide, they are hosting a Stop the Steal Success from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. tonight. So a 4-hour press conference over in Lansing, Michigan, with the intent to encourage legislature and the legislators to recognize the significant election fraud. So that is literally happening right now. You can head on over to stopthesteal.us, or you can find that on a number of different YouTube channels. The other big one today was this here from Sidney Powell and L. Lynn Wood. They had a press conference today in Willis Park. It was interesting. It looks like these two have teamed up now. They have a new website called kraken-wood.com, hashtag Kraken, hashtag fight back. And they had this conference today, this press conference so-called. It was really more like a rally, I would say. It felt like a Trump rally. I watched bits and pieces of it. Some of the live streams were clipping out. There wasn't actually a lot of, I would say, mainstream media press there. This was mostly Right Side Broadcasting Network and One American News Network, and some of the right-sided networking or network companies were there, but none of the other mainstream people were there. So some of the feeds were a little hit or miss, and it wasn't really, I would say, a press conference, like as much as it was a rally. A lot of Trump flags, a lot of American flags, a lot of rah-rah talk there going on, but not a lot of interesting legal news that we were able to really glean from that. And that's kind of a bummer there. I think that this was not particularly effective in terms of a legal strategy, but I understand why this would be necessary from a public persona perspective. They needed to keep the energy up. They want to be a part of the rally, keep the energy high. And if you remember, we've talked about the two different avenues where these battles are taking place. One, of course, is in the court of law. The other is in the court of public opinion. And so the rally today from Sidney Powell and Lin Wood was more for the latter, I think. In the court of public opinion, they wanted to go into Georgia, rally a bunch of energy up around the idea that they need to do some more inspections there. They need to dive into a deeper audit. And there was some pretty colorful language coming out from Lin Wood in particular about not nominating or not supporting the Republican candidates for the Senate, which is, in my mind, not such a good strategy, right? If the Democrats are, according to them, going to be ruining America, I think one of the key blockades there is going to be the Senate. And so to sort of use that language is not particularly helpful for the Republican cause. And I'm not sure how effective it was in terms of creating momentum for the movement. That being said, I will say this. Last night on December 1st, Ms. Powell did post a press release on the website. So as you can see here from this Kraken Wood website, there was a new press release that does have some pretty interesting new information and new allegations. And so I think kind of what happened probably was that they had this new information that they wanted to present to the public. They thought a press conference would be the good way to do it. And then it sort of turned into this, mega rally, and a lot of this information didn't come out. So instead of focusing on the rally and clipping from that, let's go through what Sidney Powell actually posted on her website over at krakenwood.com. And here is the title of this. She's talking a lot about Dominion here. Here she says, it's not the number sign, hashtag Kraken release to Dominion system statement on the massive election fraud charged. And this is by Sidney Powell. Like I said, this was posted last night on December 1st. And she goes pretty in depth into what is actually happening in Georgia. And so I want to break this down. A lot of this has to center around Dominion specifically. And so follow along with me as we sort of identify what's happening here. Because remember what we were talking about. In Georgia, they had a sort of a delayed count. Then they did a recount, an audit. They had the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, sort of really jump in there with both feet and say, we're going to start auditing these results. We're going to do a deep dive on this thing. Well, then we turn around and it wasn't actually a full audit, and it wasn't actually a manual hand recount, and it wasn't actually verifying the signatures that were coming in on the outside of the envelopes. And so there are a lot of problems with this so-called audit, this so-called recount. And she goes in a little bit further in details, specifically what was going on with Dominion and the signature verification and the receipts that a voter gets after their ballot has been submitted in Georgia. And so in Arizona, I voted by mail. I just filled out a ballot, put it in the envelope, signed my signature, sent it in. I used a Sharpie. Pretty simple. My ballot was counted, said my vote was registered when I checked the website, so I had no problems with that. But in different parts of the country, they have different systems. And in Georgia, apparently the way that it works is you have an electronic tabulator machine that you punch your vote into this computer software, then it prints out a receipt. So that's kind of what we're talking about as we get into this. So let's go into Ms. Powell's press release. So what I'm going to talk to you about in these next slides, this is her statement that is on the website. So this is not an official court document, but she is detailing some of the claims that are forthcoming. And my understanding is today in Arizona, there's another Kraken lawsuit that I think was just filed like 10 minutes ago, and we have a hearing scheduled in federal court for tomorrow. So a lot of this stuff is going very, very quickly. And, this information could be outdated or updated literally as I'm speaking, but this is what she posted last night. So I think we should take a look at it because there are some interesting new claims here. So let's dive into it. She says, Dominion Voting Systems issued a statement responding to lawsuits we filed in Michigan, and now Dominion is lying. There is, in fact, massive fraud. Legal votes created a historic landslide for Donald Trump. Already heard most of that. Dominion contends that it is impossible for any tampering of the votes on its machines to have occurred. Our evidence proves otherwise. We're going to talk a lot about this impossibility. She says prior analysis, and this is new information here, prior analysis of server logs on Dominion's machines in Georgia primary elections, so not this election, the Georgia primary elections, has shown remote access into those servers in the middle of the night when no election workers were around. So not this current election, but previously, the logs show employees access the servers in the middle of the night. Don't really know who that was. She says possibly Dominion employees. It could have been on behalf of adverse nation states such as Iran or China. We don't really know. But she goes on, witnesses have observed what appeared to be Dominion technical support staff connecting remotely to election servers during the tabulation of the primary and runoff elections in Georgia to resolve technical problems. And so that action violated Georgia and federal law. And so we're talking a lot about the primaries there and the runoff elections. And this idea from Ms. Powell is that these were accessed remotely during those elections. We now know. We're looking backwards, and we can see that after analyzing those logs, there's pretty good indications that there were outside sources who were literally in the machines as the elections were going on during election night when they were supposed to be closed, when other employees left. They access the servers. So that's what she's claiming. This is in her public statement. Now, this is going to be something that we will see, right? What is the evidence? Do we have those logs? Presumably we do. This is all government material. It's all should be part of the record that the Secretary of State keeps, that Dominion gives over to the Secretary of State. You would imagine if the government enters into a contract with a private company and that company says that they did something a certain way, you would imagine that you'd be able to verify that. Okay, that's great. Show me the logs. Cool. Looks kosher. Everything's good. Thanks for working with us. And so looking backwards during the primary, we can see this is weird. Did that happen this time? And this is what a large part of the fight is about. This is where the battle is. It's all about discovery. They want access to go get those logs, to get that data, to see what happened here. We've already seen in a number of different legislative hearings, Rudy Giuliani had the former, I think, Attorney Colonel who was here in Arizona talking about the spiderweb chart of all the different data that was transferred from all the various servers from Dominion to different parts of the world and the spikes of activity during election night. So she's saying, we're looking back. We saw that this happened in Georgia in the last election during the primaries. We want to see more of that now. And I think this is where a lot of the battle is. They want access to the data. Currently, the government and Dominion have it. So in order to come and be able to specify new allegations with clarity, they need access to go see what is going on. We go back to Ms. Powell's complaint. She says that Dominion also contends here that any such tampering would have been revealed by the hand count audit conducted in Georgia. She says clearly that is not true. She explains the ballots marked by the ballot marking devices, the BMDs, and this is important here, we're going to break this down, do not record the vote in a software independent way. So the ballots that are marked do not record the vote in a software independent way. Instead, Dominion software is responsible for taking the voter's machine input, then it prints it on a paper ballot in a QR code that contains the vote that is read by the scanners, but it cannot be read by humans. Only a text summary that is also printed can be read by humans. So what does that mean? Well, I'm going to show you an example of what this looks like. But basically, she's saying that when you go into the voting booth and you enter your vote on the software, what it's going to do, it's going to print out a receipt. The receipt's going to have two things. So you're just using this software right now to just fill out a ballot. That's all this computer is for. It just prints out a ballot and a receipt. Then you scan the receipt and you keep the receipt. That's a record. It's a paper ballot. Technically, the machine just helped you generate the ballot. It's just helping you select what you want. Then it's going to print out something that is your voting record. And then in the QR code, that's what you scan into the machine that scans the vote. So the machine translates your selections into a QR code. That QR code is then moved over to a different machine that scans the QR code, which then registers your vote. All right. So she goes on. She says robust and repeatedly confirmed behavior research shows only 6.5% of voters actually bother to scrutinize the human readable text. 93% of those voters are really not voter verified at all. And the reason why this is important is because under Georgia law, what needs to happen is the voter needs to be able to verify the document, and it needs to be voter verified under the law. She's saying that's not happening here in Georgia. So here's what it looks like. So I was able to just kind of Google in Georgia ballot receipt, and I came up with this. It says it's a demonstration ballot for the state of Georgia. And you can see here, it's exactly what she's talking about. So we have this QR code, which prints out some information, and that's what the computer reads. The rest of this receipt is what the human being reads. We can't read QR codes, but we can see this language here, and it says, what is the state flower? Vote for one. Vote for, and then it tells you the petunia, which apparently is a Democrat. What is the state bird? Vote for one. Vote for the bald eagle, which again, apparently is a Democrat. So this is sort of reflecting how the actual vote went, apparently. Georgia is the nation #1 producer of the 3 Ps. What are they? Vote for one, pears, pecans, and peanuts, and so on, right? So it's just a sample ballot. What is the state tree? Vote for the cherry blossom. That is a nonpartisan group because there's no party behind it. But most of it is for the Democrats here on this sample ballot, but that's how it works. And so now that we understand what we're looking at, the receipt, the document, and what Sidney Powell is claiming happened, let's take a look at what the problem is. Well, let me break that up. I don't think I clipped this part of the slide, but here's what she's saying happened. So when you actually fill out this ballot, the allegation here is that what's going into this QR code is not the same data as what's happening in the human printout portion of this. So in other words, the machine, when you enter your choices into the ballot marking device machine, the BMD, you go in and you vote for Donald Trump. All right, great. The machine will now print out your ballot with the QR code that you're going to take to a separate machine that you scan the QR code in. You don't know what the QR code says, but it really says that you just voted for Joe Biden. What? How does that happen? Well, because the ballot marking device is run by Dominion, and their software, according to Ms. Powell, is the software that is manipulating the vote. So you go in and you press Donald Trump. The machine will take your Donald Trump vote and it will spit it out in the receipt that says that's legible, that's in the text. So when you go in there and you say, who did I vote for? It'll show Donald Trump. And you say, yeah, perfect. That's exactly right. I did vote for Donald Trump, didn't I? Felt good. And that's what you take away from the ballot center. That's what you leave home with. That's your receipt. But the QR code didn't register Donald Trump. So when you scan it in, the numbers that are being counted are for Joe Biden. That's her allegation here, which is a big claim. And it's something that's a little bit different than some of the other allegations we've seen out there, that the software, this is the point where they're making the division. And so when you go back and you do a recount and you say, okay, let's take a look at all the QR codes that were scanned, because presumably there's a log, and you go back and you check the scan, you say, yeah, it's clear, it's a Joe Biden vote, right? And that voter voted this way, and this, you can connect it back. And so when they do the recount, it looks all well and good, but the person doesn't know, because the ballots are now secret. They don't know how their vote was counted. Their receipt, if they kept it, shows that they voted for Donald Trump. When they go on the website and they check the website and they say, well, hey, was my vote counted? It shows, yeah, it was counted. You voted. Now, they're not going to tell you how they voted, so you can't go in there and confirm that it was for one candidate or another, but there's a separation there. And she's claiming that this is because of Dominion, that there is literal software manipulation taking place at this instance. It's a big claim. She goes on, she says, maybe there's somebody behind all this who has some motivation for this type of malfeasance. In her letter, she goes on and says, lastly, since the last election, we've learned that one of Dominion's top technical officers, Dr. Coomer, whose name is on multiple Dominion patents, has participated in Antifa conference calls and has an intense loathing of President Donald Trump. So this guy's top technical officer, multiple patents. He says on an Antifa conference call, Dr. Coomer admitted that he made sure that Donald Trump would not win. Dominion appears not to have protected itself. Neither did our government institutions. Our country must deal with all this stuff. These are egregious federal and state crimes. So now she's taking this back and connecting this to that boogeyman, which is an individual or an organization that we have been trying to identify here, or at least see if they can identify, because I think it's pretty important and compelling in this entire electoral fraud argument. Who's behind it? Who's responsible for it? And there's a lot of people who have a lot of varying ideas on this thing, including myself. But now she has identified somebody in her complaints who is kind of this boogeyman, this guy who has a name, and his name is Dr. Coomer, and he hates Donald Trump. And he is responsible for a number of patents. He's one of the top technical officers of Dominion. He's on record as having a problem with this, and specifically stating Donald Trump's not going to win. Okay, so on the one hand, you can say, all right, well, this guy was probably just talking a bunch of blather, probably a bunch of locker room talk, was just puffing himself up, getting into conversations with his colleagues who also hate Donald Trump. And it's like locker room talk. It's just a bunch of guys trying to one up each other. And he's saying, well, I'm Dominion. I'm just joking around when I'm saying this, but I'm going to make sure Donald Trump doesn't win, right? So that's one way to interpret that conversation. It could totally be taken out of context. He could have been talking about something else. I'm donating money to a super PAC. I'm donating to this, website or whatever it is. So there are a number of different justifications as to why he could have said what he said. I'm not saying that every single statement that comes out of a person's mouth that they should be held accountable to that. I'm a criminal defense attorney. Remember, we represent a lot of people who say things they don't mean. Just because somebody said something doesn't mean they're going to do it. About once a month, I say, I'm about to jump out that window right now to my business partner, and I never do it, but I say it all the time. And he understands that. And so, those types of conversations happen. You want to be cautious about taking a statement out of context. At the same time, if you have the chief person, one of the top technical directors for the company that does voting for your country, and there's problems with the voting, and they all seem to be going one direction towards a bias against Donald Trump, and one of these individuals just happened to say, we're going to make sure Donald Trump doesn't win this thing. We're going to make sure that doesn't happen. Don't you worry about it, boys. I am here. I'm going to take care of this issue. Maybe that is justification to dive into it a little bit further. Maybe that's good reason for us to be a little bit skeptical. Now we have a motive, we have a means, there's a lot of opportunity. We have kind of the magic formula in order to see some malfeasance. Dr. Coomer obviously doesn't like the guy. He is a part of the company that's going to be counting the votes, and there was a lot of opportunity around the country, as we are seeing, for all sorts of deviations from this traditional electoral process in light of all of the lawsuits, COVID modifications, and so on. So motive, means, and opportunity, this guy has it. Or he could just have a bad case of TDS. Who knows? We don't know. But she goes on, Ms. Powell, and she says, here is what we're talking about. All right. In other words, the BMD ballots are not voter verifiable. They cannot be audited in a software independent way. The credibility of the BMD ballot can be no greater than the credibility of Dominion systems, which copious experts have shown is deeply compromised. The system has no verifiable audit trail. Dominion claims its codes and systems have been verified and certified to be secured against malicious actors. She says that has been comprehensively refuted. She talks about this other case called Curling versus Kemp. And apparently in that case, which I have not read yet, Judge Totenberg issued a 147-page order analyzing the evidence in Dominion. It is also refuted by the company's own manual, is what she says. So I wanted to dive into this a little bit because one of the allegations here is that evidence of this variety, evidence of Dominion, evidence of software breaches or any type of technical insecurity, a lot of people have been just kind of having a difficult time wrapping their head around how this works or how possible this is. Largely, many people think, well, so many sets of eyeballs have been on this thing. This company's been around for a long time. It's been vetted by a number of different states. Attorneys generals have, some of them have done their own audits. They've had their own forensic experts. And so you would just presume that a government would be competent enough to vet their election software before they approve it and get it implemented and rolled out in their cities, in their states, in their precincts. But can we be so sure? I want to talk to you about software security in general. Now, it might be interesting because I'm a criminal defense attorney and I don't have a background in that, but there was a sort of an example that caught my eye when I was thinking about how to break this down. And here we're talking about Dominion, right? It's a company, certainly, probably worth, many tens of millions of dollars, maybe $1 billion. I don't know what the market cap is on it or how, what the size or the scope of that company is in particular. But it's a small company relative to some of the other big names in security, things like Google, things like Apple, places like Sony, these big major tech companies that really invest a ton in infrastructure and security. And so if we're going to make a comparison, if we're going to say, okay, well, what's the level of security for Dominion versus, let's say, for Google, right? You would imagine that Google is probably highly, highly secure and that essentially nobody can break into their software, break into their code. Same with Apple, same with Sony, these different mega corporations. And that's not exactly the case. These companies are not invulnerable. There are all sorts of programs that the companies offer themselves in order to get people to expose their vulnerabilities back to them. So what I'm talking about here is Google. Google has what's known as the Chrome web browser. Many of you may be using it to watch this program right now, but they have something that's pretty interesting there. They call it a Chrome Vulnerability Rewards Program. And so let's think about this in terms of the context of the election. So here is a screenshot from Google Application Security. They have this program where it was launched in 2010 and it wants to reward the contributions of security researchers who invest their time and their effort in helping to make Chrome and Chrome operating system more secure. So what are they looking for? They want any security bug in Chrome or Chrome OS at all. If you find a bug, send it over. Two things: they want to make sure that the bugs make it to our stable beta and dev development channels. They want to make sure that it's, anything that comes from third-party components that they use, and so on. So what you see here is this literal program from Google itself that says, if you find a problem with our software, I want you to send it to us. That's how important that it is. If it's a violation, if it's hacking into our Chrome software, It's a big deal. We want to know about it. And so you may be asking yourself, well, okay, so what are they going to give you? Like $10 for a vulnerability, $25 gift card to Google Play if you submit a vulnerability to them? Well, the answer is no. It's actually, for a good one, 30 grand is what they want. $30,000 they're willing to pay you if you give them a high quality report and a functional exploit. So it's $30,000. And what they're asking for here is something that would be a sandbox escape, any sort of memory corruption in a non-sandbox process. So it starts at 30,000. You can get them low if you have a Chrome patch bonus or there's an issue with a exploitation, mitigation, bypass, whatever that is. That's a $5,000 bug bounty fee. In other words, if you find this stuff, they'll pay you to tell them about it. And think about this, $30,000. That is a significant amount of money, right? For good reason. Because if you have a bug that you can exploit in that way, if you can just go in and you can send somebody a link that they click in their Chrome browser that then allows that piece of software to install spyware or malware on your computer that then sends them all your passwords or transfers your bank account or spams all your Facebook friends or pockets all of your Bitcoin. Any one of those things that has unfettered access to your machine, then it can go out and it can propagate. It can send that same spam, the same virus, whatever it is, to a number of other different people with the same exploit. They click it, happens again, and that's how these mega worms propagate. You see those pop up every about 5 years or so. There's a new worm that's ravaging through the country, and nobody really knows what to do about it because this stuff is that powerful. And is it really worth $30,000 for Google? I think it's probably worth 10 times that, maybe 100 times that, because of the power there. And so you can see just how important this stuff is. And Google has made this public. Has Dominion done anything like that? Not to my knowledge. I haven't seen anything quite like that. Not sure if it exists or not. So all of this stuff is private, which means if you can find somebody who knows how to root around these things and they have an exploit, maybe they hold on to that thing. Maybe they do use it. They don't turn it into a place like Google. And we talk about the people who are able to do these things. Do you need a mega corporation? Do you need a massive company or a massive government like China? China, how big must their intelligence, security, warfare division, what does that look like? And what if you set all of those people towards one goal, which would be hacking an election or breaking into Dominion software? Do you think they could do it? Probably. I was thinking back to another time when I was younger. I was in college and I got the first iPhone. And you remember when you had the first iPhone, any of you early adopters out there, there was a process called jailbreaking where you could literally run some code on your iPhone and it would break it out of Apple's ecosystem. So you could install private software, you could do whatever you want. There was an app repository called Cydia back then where you could download and install whatever you wanted on your iPhone. It was very cool. I played a lot with that. And this was all done. The way that Apple was able to sort of fall is because a hacker by the name of GeoHot was able to crack their encryption, was able to crack their security mechanisms. And this wasn't a mega team. This was one guy. This is him right here. He was born in 1989. He was 17 when he did this. George Hotz, also known as GeoHot, he currently is an American security hacker known for developing iOS jailbreaks. He also reverse engineered the PlayStation 3, and then he did it again with Android. So you can see here's a little bit of a clip from his bio. He hacked iOS, PlayStation 3. He literally exploited the whole thing. He got read and write access to the machine's system memory, as well as hyper-level access to the machine CPU. In June 2014, he then published a root exploit software hack for the Samsung Galaxy S5. So Sony, he took out Samsung and he took out Apple, and he started when he was 17 years old. So all of these allegations that Dominion is unhackable, that there's no way that anybody can get into it, I would imagine that if you gave George Hotz about 10 minutes, that he could probably do it. And he's just a young American security researcher hacker. As far as I've been following the guy, no malfeasance there. Just likes to poke around and see what he can break and see how he can access things. So what if you do that with China? What if you do that with a different country who really wants to get in and muddle things up? Do you think they could do that? Is it possible? I would like to think so. I unfortunately would like not to think so. It would be great if that wasn't the case, but it is, and that means that we have to deal with it. All right, so that's what Sidney Powell had. I think it's very interesting. We're going to see where these lawsuits develop. It sounds like right now what she's asking for in the main chunk of that document is that she just wants more information. She wants more access to discovery. We saw previously that they wanted access to the actual machine so that they can go in and do their security investigation and see what it turns up. So we will continue to follow along Ms. Powell and all of her different lawsuits. It's another good reminder to make sure you're part of the program by subscribing. All right, now let's talk about the next big news story of the day. We have Donald Trump, who gave a very long speech today. It actually wasn't a public speech. This was a video recording. This is what it looked like here. And this is him in front of the presidential podium with the flags on either side. And so we're going to talk about this video that he put out today because it's certainly newsworthy. In the video, it's 46 minutes and 7 minutes long. He uses some visual aids. It's a very Trumpy speech. And it's certainly pre-recorded. There's a number of camera jumps. They're called jump cuts, where he's speaking from the front like you see in this image. And then we're going to see some other clips when we get there where the camera cuts to the side. So what you can tell from that is there are probably a lot of different breaks in the clip. So he's recording one bit, switching angles or flubbing a word or whatever it is, and then switching to a different camera in order to hide the cut. Right? If you have somebody like me, like you're watching me right now, and there's a bunch of cuts, you can see the cuts. But if you cut and you switch to a different camera, you can hide the cut because it just looks like you're switching camera angle. So there was a lot of that. So my point here is that this was a highly researched, coordinated, scripted type of event. Donald Trump usually doesn't do stuff like this. Normally it's off the cuff. He's talking to the press on the way to the helicopter, or he's doing just a quick video. Sometimes it kind of feels like somebody just pulled out an iPhone and just shot it. That's traditionally his style. This thing was orchestrated, very well scripted, very well lit. A lot of preparation went into this speech, which means we can put a lot of weight into this. You know, this is something that I think carries some heft to it, and this is going to be what the president's position is moving forward. So a couple highlights. Basically, what the big takeaway on this, if you're not going to take away anything else, he's talking about a couple things. Number one, the solution. What is the remedy? He goes through 45 minutes of all the different types of voter fraud, and he covers a lot of ground. I mean, he kind of condenses most of the things that we've been talking about into about 30 minutes, which is impressive. He just rapid fire bullet point, boom, 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 this, and this, and all of these different states, and he squeezes a lot in quickly. His remedy here is to ask the Supreme Court for help. I mean, that's largely what I took away from this. He wants some further investigations into basically the signature ballots. He towards the end of the presentation, he goes on and he says signatures. It's all about the signatures because this is how they were exploiting the election. They were delivering a bunch of unlawful ballots because the signatures weren't being checked. They all got admitted. So that's really what he's talking about. He goes after also absentee ballots. Some good things that he did. He used some charts. I have two clips of that. He shows you some of the same charts and the graphs that we've talked about on this channel, specifically from Michigan and also from Wisconsin. So he actually, in the middle of his speech, and we're going to show you, he actually holds a board up and says, look at the spike here. It's kind of ridiculous. Same thing we've had covered here. Same comment I've made. He was pretty effective with the whole thing. I think at one time he was a little bit less effective. He starts kind of going in and railing a little bit about the prosecutions that are taking place against him and his family. He goes on and he talks about a New York prosecutor, and he says, I never met the person. I don't know what she's so mad about, but she's suing me, and this person's suing me, and they keep transferring this stuff. And it felt a little bit personal to me. It felt like he was kind of making this sort of about him. I understand why he was doing it. Largely, he wants to show that there's this bigger movement out there. This election is centered around him because he's Donald Trump, but it's not always going to be Donald Trump. There's going to be another president in there at some point, whether it's this next term or the following term. But at some point, this is going to change, and we don't want the stench of this election to carry on to the next president, is essentially what he was saying. And I really resonated with a lot of what he had to say here. He wants an investigation. At one point in the speech, he talks about, listen, I want what's fair. I just want to know what the result was, as I think many Americans do. We don't want to disenfranchise the 74 million people who voted for him. So as long as we know what the results were, great, no problem. And I think that this was very reasonable of the guy. And largely, we've seen a lot of sort of, I would say, aggressive language from him. But what we saw today was a little bit different. It was more practical. It was more logical. It was sort of reasoned and even-keeled in a way that we haven't seen largely. A lot of it has been a lot of sort of bluster, a lot of anger, a lot of, I won this election, I won it. Today was this documented, methodic presentation of the evidence, and for many Americans, it's going to be the first time they heard it, and I think it was pretty dang effective. So let's dive in and let's see what some of the clips look like. So he starts off by talking about Wisconsin numbers, and as is the case usually here, I like to double speed some of these videos up. So if he sounds like he's talking fast, this is because this is a double speed, because politicians talk too slowly. We don't have time to listen to him. So here is Donald Trump today during his pre-recorded video.
Which is far more in numbers or votes than we need to overturn the results of a state. In
Can
other
you
words,
hear that?
in Wisconsin, as an example, where we were way up on election night, they ultimately had us miraculously losing by 20,000 votes. And I can show you right here that Wisconsin, we're leading by a lot. And then at 3:42 in the morning, there was this. It was a massive dump of votes, mostly Biden. Almost all Biden. And to this day, everyone's trying to figure out, where did it come from? But I went from leading by a lot to losing by a little. And that's right here. That's at 3:42 in the morning. That's Wisconsin. A terrible thing.
Yeah, so there's Donald Trump, and you can see that's persuasive, right? That chart, whether you have a good explanation for that chart or not, if you see that chart and you see that spike and you say, that's weird, those all go for Joe Biden, that's compelling. Now, as an American, you're watching that and you may say, that doesn't look good, right? That doesn't look good. And Donald Trump uses very simple language here. He's just, hey, just follow along. Look at this spike. It's ridiculous. I lost. I was winning by a lot. Now I lost by a little. And that type of language is compelling. And people think that Donald Trump is a simpleton and he's not sophisticated. I totally disagree with that. I think that he speaks and communicates in a way that is very persuasive and highly effective. He doesn't get enough credit for that, unfortunately. If he were to come out and say, well, I had a statistical anomaly and an expert witness came in and said that the average deviation here was 1.25, which is outside of the specific norms and so on, other people, their eyes would glaze over. He just says, no, look, here's a chart. Here's a big spike here. It's kind of weird, isn't it? I was winning by a lot. You can see how much I was up, and then it just kind of faded down here at fraud, and beats that point home. He does that again when we get over to Michigan. He does the same thing, and I think, again, it's effective. Let's see what he has to say about Dominion, though, because remember, Dominion was a little bit of a different topic. With Dominion, we thought that he may have been backing away from some of those allegations, largely because of the departure with Sidney Powell. Remember, Sidney Powell was part of his team. Apparently, I mean, there's allegations or there's statements now saying that she was never really hired by him, and there was kind of just a loose working relationship. But in my mind, she was on the team. She was part of Rudy Giuliani's entourage. They went out there in front of that first press conference. She was standing right there in between Rudy Giuliani and Jenna Ellis. Now, she's not there anymore, so she was on the team. Now she's not on the team. So the original thought was, okay, maybe they're distancing themselves from her claims. Maybe her claims are too explosive. Maybe they're going to implicate Republicans in fraud. Maybe they're going to implicate Trump in fraud. Maybe there's something there, and the Trump team needed to distance themselves from it. And we were thinking, well, maybe they're not going to follow up on any of these Dominion allegations. Well, that's not really the case. Donald Trump here talks about Dominion specifically. Let's see what he has to say.
Already voted. And on top of everything else, we have a company that's very suspect. Its name is Dominion. With a turn of a dial,
so there's that jump cut.
You can press a button for Trump, and the vote goes to Biden. What kind of a system is this? We have to go to paper. Maybe it takes longer, but the only secure system is paper. Not these systems that nobody understands, including, in many cases, the people that run them, although unfortunately, I think they understand them far too well. In one Michigan county, as an example,
and another
used
jump
Dominion
cut.
systems, they found that nearly 6,000 votes had been wrongly switched from Trump to Biden. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is what we caught. How many didn't we catch? Are there hundreds of other examples throughout the country? Are there thousands? We just got lucky, and they called it a glitch. But we found numerous glitches that evening. 96% of the company's political donations went to Democrats, not surprisingly. And frankly, when you look at who's running the company, who's in charge, who owns it, which we don't know, where are the votes counted, which we think are counted in foreign countries, not in the United States, Dominion is a disaster. Election authorities in Texas have repeatedly...
Yeah. So again, the Dominion stuff, it to me, this whole thing felt like he was really sort of just summarizing all of the different complaints from all of the different avenues. And we've been covering a lot of them here. And some of them I think have been debunked. Some of them have not been debunked. Some of them are still up in the air. Some of them we need some legal, I would say, interpretations of whether or not, a lot of these allegations will arise to the level of necessitating some sort of action from the courts or from the legislatures. That's left to be seen. But here's Donald Trump talking about that. Now, the last clip that we have from the president is when he's talking about Wisconsin here. So let's wrap up with this clip.
This is Michigan. At 6:31 in the morning, a vote dump of
I'm sorry, this is Michigan.
49,772 votes came in unexpectedly. We were winning by a lot. That batch was received in horror. Nobody knows anything about it. By the way, there's your line. This is one of many. Here's what is normal. And all of a sudden, look at that. This is normal. Normal. Look, even here. Normal. And then boom, all of a sudden, I go from winning by a lot to losing a tight race. It's corrupt. Detroit is corrupt. I have a lot of friends in Detroit. They know it. But Detroit is totally corrupt. Look at this. Look at this. That's at 6:31 in the morning. Unexpectedly came in.
Yeah, it's pretty compelling. Those charts don't look good. And he does a good job with sort of repeating the same point over and over again. You'll notice that with him. He says, he makes a point. He says it about 5 times. Oh, there's a big spike. It's a really big spike. Down here, not so big. Down here, not so big. On this other side, that's pretty small. But here, really right here, it's sort of like that scene in Tommy Boy when he gets hit in the head with that, the 2x4, and he says, well, it hurts right here, not so much up here, not so much down here, but just right here. And he just kind of repeats that point over and over, and you can't miss it. He's doing the same thing with this line, with this bruise on the election. He's saying, look at this thing. And that type of stuff is effective. It's people think it's facile. People think it's, I would say unsophisticated, but I think it's very effective. And if people can understand that. He stands there with the chart and just holds it up for several minutes as he's just cramming it in your face. And people get it. That type of stuff resonates. So overall on this, I'll say that this was a win. The press conference today from Lin Wood and Sidney Powell, not so much. I think that was less effective. It was a little bit more, I would say, rah-rah, kind of borderline hysterical. And that is not effective. People don't want to see that type of, I would say, momentum. I think it's good for certain reasons, but when we're talking about legal process and we're talking about, how people and legislatures are going to conduct themselves, Donald Trump's presentation was much more effective. He actually talks about the evidence. He's showing some evidence in front of you, and it's compelling. If he were to do that in a court of law, he'd get objections all over the place. He'd asked and answered, and he would not be allowed to continue to say and repeat the same thing over and over again. But he's not in a court of law. He's in the court of public opinion, and he's able to make the same point and really hammer that home. And I think this video, by the time you wake up tomorrow, it's going to have tens of millions of views, and it's already not looking so good if you are in the let's just stop talking about this election stuff anymore. Now we saw a very, very aggressive frenzy of Team Trump all around the country. We had Sidney Powell, we had Rudy Giuliani, we had Donald Trump himself. Today, Wednesday, was just a massive onslaught of efforts from around that team. And they're not alone on this. They have some help from the Senate. Senator Ted Cruz yesterday released a statement, a letter over to the Supreme Court, urging the Supreme Court to take this issue up, to give us some answers on this. We've been a little bit critical of the Supreme Court here, largely because they refused to answer these questions prior to the election. Pre-election, we've been covering all of the different lawsuits, many of which were initiated and originated by the Democrats through a number of different organizations and a number of different groups in multiple battleground states. We said they were the ones who started it. They wanted to change all the COVID rules and modify the elections, literally on the eve of the election. We covered this yesterday in Nevada, where they made massive changes, sending out unsolicited mail-in ballots to everybody, whether you wanted one or not. They made the change on August 3rd. The election was on November 3rd, just a short couple months later. So they're the ones who start this stuff. Now, Ted Cruz is urging the Supreme Court to come and rectify some of the problem. If you remember previously, a lot of these lawsuits were just knocking on the door of the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania specifically. They said, hey, we just changed our election deadline to 3 days after the election. Supreme Court, can we do that? Because our Constitution, I think, says we can't do that. And Justice Roberts on the Supreme Court refused to hear the case. He sided with the liberals on the court, which he's inclined to do, but because Amy Coney Barrett was not on the court, we had a 4-4 split, which means the lower court ruling stands. So this issue could have been addressed already. And the other 4 who wanted to hear the case, Judge Alito, Judge Thomas, they wanted to hear the case because they saw then that this was unconstitutional, what was happening out of Pennsylvania. And so now Ted Cruz is coming in and he's saying SCOTUS should hear the emergency appeal on the Pennsylvania election challenge. He posted this on Twitter late yesterday evening. And we're going to go through that letter here because I think he makes some good points. And I do think that ultimately the Supreme Court is probably going to hear this thing because we need them to. The country needs some answers on this stuff. But before we dive into what the letter says, let's talk about Senator Ted Cruz because he's a little bit of a flamethrower. He throws out some vitriol from time to time. He gets under the skin of some people on the other side. And so one of the first attacks that you hear when it comes to Ted Cruz is, oh, he's just a partisan. He's an idiot. He's certainly a partisan, but I would not call him an idiot. This guy has a lot of experience in the Supreme Court specifically. If you go over to his Wikipedia page, you're going to find some of this. When he was Texas Solicitor General, he was appointed there. He served in that position from 2003 to 2008, so just 5 years. The office was established in 1999, so on and so forth. Okay, it says Cruz would take a leadership role in the U.S. in articulating a vision of strict constructionism. All right, as Solicitor General, Cruz argued before the Supreme Court of the United States 9 times, winning 5 cases and losing 4. Okay, that is a lot. Anytime you're going to be talking in front of the Supreme Court 1 time is like going to the Super Bowl. He was there 9 times and he won 5 of the cases. Cruz authored 70 U.S. Supreme Court briefs. He presented 43 oral arguments. His 9 appearances before the Supreme Court are the most of any practicing lawyer in Texas or any current member of Congress. In other words, the guy knows what he's talking about when it comes to the Supreme Court. He knows how to get there. He knows how to write briefs in order to be successful there. He knows how to go there and argue. He knows how to win. He's got a winning record in the Supreme Court. It's pretty good. And this is what the letter says. So the point of giving you some background on this is this guy is a legal phenom. If he wasn't a senator, he'd probably be on the federal bench somewhere in one of the district courts, maybe a circuit court. And if not there, he might even be on the Supreme Court. I mean, his name has been kicked around there because of his pedigree. Somebody who went to the best schools, the same schools, and has the same background that you would want out of somebody who is on the Supreme Court. Well, not what I would want, but what the establishment wants. Anyways, let's get into the letter. All right, so this comes from Senator Ted Cruz. Said this yesterday. He urges the U.S. Supreme Court to hear an emergency appeal on the Pennsylvania election challenge. He says, today, an emergency appeal was filed in the U.S. Supreme Court challenging the election results in Pennsylvania. The appeal raises serious legal issues, and I believe the court should hear the case on an expedited basis. He says, the Pennsylvania Constitution requires in-person voting, except in narrow and defined circumstances. Late last year, the Pennsylvania legislature passed a law that purported to allow universal mail-in voting, notwithstanding the Pennsylvania Constitution's express prohibition. So he's saying they passed a law in violation of the Constitution. We've talked about this at length here. It was Act 77 in Pennsylvania that changed a bunch of stuff. And remember, it's all because of COVID. Coronavirus, everything's going to melt down. We don't have a democracy anymore. We have to change everything. That was the big cry. And we saw millions of dollars worth of litigation happen all across the country to change the election in light of coronavirus. And that's what he's talking about. He's saying Act 77, even though the legislature passed it, it was in violation of the Constitution because the Constitution is supreme. The Constitution is the foundation. You can't pass a law that doesn't comport with the Constitution. It's called being unconstitutional. So he goes on in his letter and he says here, this appeal argues that Pennsylvania cannot change the rules in the middle of the game. If Pennsylvania wants to change how voting occurs, the state must follow the law to do so. The illegality was compounded by the Democrat Supreme Court in Pennsylvania, which we've talked about. It's a 5-2 court in favor of the Democrats. They've issued multiple decisions that reflect the political and ideological basis. Just over a month ago, Supreme Court judges Justice Alito and Justice Thomas and Gorsuch wrote correctly, I believe, he says, concerning the Pennsylvania court's previous decision to count ballots received after Election Day that, quote, there is a strong likelihood that the state Supreme Court decision violates the federal Constitution, which we already talked about. We've been talking about that for months now. Ever since this original lawsuit was underway, we were suspecting that this litigation was going to be very relevant and pertinent. And they're right. Judges Alito, Gorsuch, and Thomas were all exactly right. Judge Roberts, for whatever reason, just decided to let this stuff stand. It was knocking at the door before the election. Could have been settled. Judge Roberts said, we're not going to do that. Don't want to hear about it. Go back down. And here we are again. It's coming back up. Ted Cruz goes on. He says, in the current appeal, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court dismissed the claim based on a legal doctrine called laches. And then he explains it to the Supreme Court, which is hilarious. He says, okay, laches, which essentially means the plaintiffs waited too long to bring the challenge. So it's good that he's educating the Supreme Court on what laches are. Kind of hilarious. He knows what he's doing. But remember, this is a public letter. He's sending it to the Supreme Court, but he wants us to see it, hear it, read it, and go through it as we are here. So he's telling us what laches means. He says, but the plaintiffs reasonably argue that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has not applied that doctrine consistently, so they cannot selectively enforce it now. And as he continues, we made this point yesterday when we were talking about, yesterday or Monday, where he says, even more persuasively, the plaintiffs here, the people suing, point out that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court also held that they don't have standing to challenge the election law, another issue we've been talking about here. He says that puts them in a catch-22. Before the election, they lack standing. They can't bring a lawsuit because there's no standing. But then after the election, they've delayed too long. The court's gamemanship is that facially unconstitutional election law can never be judicially challenged. Ordinarily, he writes, the U.S. Supreme Court would stay out of election disputes, especially concerning state law. These are not ordinary times. As of today, according to a Reuters Ipsos polling, 39% of Americans believe that the election was rigged. And that is a massive number. We talked about that yesterday. This is not healthy for our democracy. The bitter division and acrimony needs resolution. I believe the U.S. Supreme Court has a responsibility to the American people that we are following the law and the Constitution. Hearing this case now on an emergency expedited basis would be an important step in helping to rebuild the confidence in the integrity of our democratic system. That's exactly right. Exactly right. Exactly right. Exactly what we've been saying here, that more conversation about this, more analysis, more details, being able to break down the claims and see them sort of laid out on the table so we can identify what works, what doesn't work, and deal with this stuff in the court of law is what we want to see. If the Supreme Court refuses to hear these claims, there's going to be a lot of really upset people who say the Supreme Court, our third branch of government, needs to step in and deal with this crisis that we're in the middle of. It feels like a constitutional-ish crisis, or it could go that way. Now, I don't think it's a crisis. I think it's very reasonable, but a lot of people think that it is. This is what we're dealing with here is all according to the rules. It's in the Constitution. Trump can challenge the election. There's rules in place for this. So it's not the end of the world, but I take Ted Cruz's point well. I think he's right. The Supreme Court does need to chime in because nobody knows what to do with these votes, with these buckets of votes. And I think the Supreme Court will help add some clarity to that. All right. So that is it for the presentation part of the show. Now let's jump in and take a look at some of the super chats that have been coming in. Let's take a look here. The first one comes from Becky Fay, who says, Rob, what do you know about the Safe Harbor Day? What does it mean to this situation for Trump lawyers? So this question has been coming up, and this one came in before the show started, and I want to just show you what we were able to pull up on that. So if we take a look here, this is a document from the Congressional Research Service. It talks about the Electoral College. And when you scroll down here, it's going to give you a little bit of the breakdown, what happens on July 6th, 2020, November 3rd, November 4th, and so on. Then we'll get down to December 8th, where it's talking about the safe harbor provision. It says that if an election results are contested in any state, and if the state prior to election day has enacted procedures to settle controversies or contests, and if these procedures have been applied and the results have been determined, then the results are considered to be conclusive, and that will apply. It's known as the safe harbor deadline. The governor of any state where there is a contest in which has decided can send a certificate describing the form and manner by which determination was made to the archivist as soon as possible. So it's not really an important date as far as I can tell. Same with December 14th, same with December 23rd, same with all of these other dates. And Judge Ginsburg, in her ruling in Bush versus Gore, made the same point that a lot of these deadlines are just kind of irrelevant. They're kind of inconsequential. Faithless electors. Then we go down here. We have a joint session on January 6th, a joint session of Congress to count the electoral votes and declare the election results. They meet on that day, and that's the day that the votes are read into the rule. When the votes have been ascertained and counted, the tellers transmit them to the vice president. If one of the tickets has a majority of 270 or more, the vice president announces the results, which shall be deemed sufficient declaration of the persons, if any, elected to vice president and president. So this is the day. That is the day, really, truly, when the votes are read. And during that session, there can be objections on that. If objections meet these requirements, the joint session recesses and the two houses separate the debate and debate the question in their respective chambers for a maximum of 2 hours. The two houses then vote separately to accept or reject the objection. So literally on that day, on January 6th, there can be further conversation, further debate about what is taking place as part of the electoral process. And so it's a good question from Becky Faye. Let's turn on that chat stream and see what's going on there. And let's take a look at some of the other ones. We have one from Sharon Quidney that doesn't have anything to say other than just sharing that beautiful face of that gorgeous little Shih Tzu. Thank you so much for being here, Sharon. We have Deborah Johnson who says, help Sidney Powell recognize Dominion IP addresses. Go to Belgrade, Serbia. Venezuela was Chavez, CIA, CFIUS construction. And I think they probably have a good idea on that. You know, Rudy Giuliani and some of his people, they had that spider map and they were showing all of the data. They were literally people capturing packets going in and out of these different servers. I think that's what they were doing. And they were analyzing with these maps all of the different connections, all of the different relationships between what was taking place in our country and some of these other servers around the world. We have Wolfgang Deo who says, remember Stuxnet? Have any machines been reviewed by cybersecurity after the election? Government should not exclusively use proprietary. How do you know your Sharpie ballot wasn't cured for Biden? So Wolfgang Deo with a lot of questions. He's talking about Stuxnet. Stuxnet, if you remember this was literal, I think it was software hacking. It may have even been hardware hacking with the Iranian nuclear facilities. Some country, I still don't know if it's been confirmed who did it, whether it was the United States, whether it was a joint operation, whether it was the Israelis, don't know who it was, but there was some people who were literally infecting the chips on the circuit boards that were being installed on the centrifuges in Iran. And the centrifuges were spinning improperly. And the Iranian scientists couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. And they were just like, well, I guess we just need to adjust some of the settings. Then they would make some adjustments and the machines would go off kilter again. So there were a lot of problems and they just couldn't figure it out until they finally just had to scrap all of the hardware. So the entire infrastructure had to go away because the chips were hacked. And you have to think about what level of involvement that requires. I mean, you're not just going in and slipping a USB drive into a piece of hardware and being able to manipulate the software at that time. What you're doing is you're literally going to the facility that is manufacturing the silicon on the chips. That's a lot of work. And there are currently agencies in the United States or presumably throughout the world that are doing this type of espionage on other countries. So the US or the Israelis went in, made these modifications. Who's to say that they're not trying to do that back to us? It's a good point. And Wolfgang Deo, I don't know that my Sharpie ballot wasn't cured for Biden. I don't know that. It only tells me that it was counted. It's all I know. So you're exactly right. It could have been cured. It could have gone to somebody else. I don't know. And that's part of the problem. We have Michael MJL says, aren't Trump's tactics a PR action? He gets no respect on the mainstream media, censored. Yeah, they are totally a PR action. He's very good at that. He's very persuasive. He speaks clearly. He speaks in small words. He speaks with punches, pop, 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 pop. He's got good cadence. I think he's very effective on camera when he does those things. It's why he had one of the best run TV shows ever. It's why he's just watched with a ton of energy everywhere he goes. That's why 50,000 people show up to his rallies or whatever those numbers were. He's compelling. He's interesting to watch. That's why this stuff is effective. And as I've said, there's a court of law where these lawsuits are being filed. Sidney Powell's taking the lead on that. Lynn Wood, Rudy Giuliani. There's Miss Weir, who we talked about yesterday, who I thought wrote a very nice complaint out of Nevada. A lot of firepower behind some of these legal motions that are going out there. But that's just one part of the battle. The other battle is in the court of public opinion, and Donald Trump is waging that one effectively. It's a good point, Michael MJL. We have JD Harness who says, I really enjoy listening to your legal analysis. Keep doing exactly what you're doing. Thanks, JD. I appreciate that. I really enjoy the fact that you're here and being a part of the program. So thanks so much for doing that. All right, let's see what else we have going on. Looks like, wow, these questions are going fast. Let me scroll back up a little bit. Zulu's in the house. Zulu says, Democrat politicians are staying silent because literally anything, I just lost it. There it is. are literally staying silent because literally anything they say will be spun into resistance. Of course, that hasn't stopped anyone from manufacturing resistance claims. Zulu's in the house. Good to see you, my friend. Dan Hill, short presentation tonight, but it was easy to follow as usual. Rob, hi Faith, hi Mom. Yeah, Dan, it was a little bit short. Normally I like to go for kind of a full hour, but today there was so much news going on that it was a little bit hard to sort of wrap my head around all of it, and a lot of it was very late breaking. So Donald Trump's video came out this afternoon. Rudy Giuliani is literally speaking this afternoon. We had the presentation from Sidney Powell that was earlier today. And so we're trying to, when you're trying to keep up with the news like that, sometimes it needs to be a little bit more compressed because I don't have enough yet to go into depth on. Now, there are some additional lawsuits that I think are coming out soon. Like I said, I was on Twitter and I saw a post. I think Kelly Ward and Sidney Powell may have filed an additional lawsuit in Arizona today. I'm pretty sure I saw that, and that there's a federal court hearing tomorrow. So when we get some of these bigger legal documents, we're going to really dive in and break those down as well. We have Melissa Johnson says all deaths were counted as COVID deaths. Where did the flu go? Suicides, pneumonia, anything and everything. Dying with COVID is different than dying from COVID. That's true. It's a very good point. We have Tina Lynn who says, R&R, if I were to search for previous cases that have been ruled on, what's the name of the law books that I need to look through? Off subject, kinda. If I were to search for previous that have been ruled on. So Tina Lynn, you're talking about doing legal research. You really wouldn't want to dive into any legal books. If you want to do research on electoral stuff, there are some free public websites that I would recommend using. I think Fastcase might be one of them. Westlaw, LexisNexis, those are the big database repositories. You might find some stuff on, what are some of the other ones? I can't remember them off the top of my head, but there's a lot of public databases that are basically search engines for case law. Even Google Scholar has a lot of stuff on there. So I would search around any one of those platforms. A law book is going to have just cases, and you're not going to be able to find anything in there. You want to use a legal research tool like Westlaw or LexisNexis or Fastcase, because that's going to give you the ability to go in and search for the key keywords that you want, the key jurisdictions you want to look up by court, by location, by circuit court, appeals court, state courts. There's a lot that goes into legal research. Being an excellent legal research is a massive skill set on its own, and I will tell you that I am not one of the best on that. I defer that stuff to the people who are better at that than I am, but it's a good question. All right, some other chats coming in. Let's see here. We have Anita, reason to believe affidavits are evidence when the I think she means affiant testifies they wrote them at the deposition at trial. We have AZ Fat 12. A missing USB is good enough for me. That's kind of like that's a nice little slogan. I like that. We have Desmond Hansen, who's in the house, who says, I just watched the PA, Arizona, and Michigan hearing, and the Michigan was the most troubling. That's good to know. So I will spend some time on that then, Desmond. I haven't seen it yet because it's going on, I think literally right now. And every one of these, there's a little bit of new information that comes out. So tomorrow, it's probably going to be a conversation about what happened at the Michigan hearing today. We'll maybe tease out some of the really good witnesses who were there. And then we're probably going to also talk about the new lawsuit that Ms. Powell is filing, which I think is happening in Arizona. We have McCain's Revenge, who says, Rob, why do Kushner, Ivanka, Jr., Eric, Rudy, and Don need preemptive pardons? I don't remember Obama and Bush families needing pardons. In your professional opinion, are pardons only needed by criminals? No, I don't think so. I think pardons are in our Constitution for very good reason, probably for the exact reason that Donald Trump is contemplating using them, largely because this is something that you want to make sure that you're not the subject of political prosecution. That's what it's for. You want to sort of leave office and not be subject to continual harassment, continual investigations that are essentially political, which is what these all feel like against Donald Trump to me. I have not seen anything really substantive. I've seen a lot of smoke there that he's evading taxes, he's not paying taxes, he's a rapist, and all of these allegations. Well, a lot of the same allegations have been made against Joe Biden and his family and against Hunter Biden. And so until we see some formal documents, until we see some actual evidence, we're just going to kind of not cover it. So I understand what you're talking about, but I don't think that pardons are only needed by criminals. I think that it's a protection. It's a mechanism that was specifically written into the Constitution for good reason. And you can read a lot of the information about why the founders put that in there. All right. We have some other super chats that just came in. Lava Java Lava says, do you know what negative effects of removing Article Section 230 could result on in social media. And we have another one before that from Arthur. So let me grab Arthur's. He said, we defended ACB so much when she was getting confirmed and attacked, but when we need her, she bails out. Kind of sickening. So that's from Arthur Pilgrim. Arthur, I'm not sure what you're talking about specifically. You know, ACB sort of did kind of not play ball a little bit. Remember, she was on the Supreme Court when a couple of new briefs were being decided, 2 of them specifically, and she refused to rule on them. And Judge Kavanaugh also refused to rule on them. So there were some that came back down with a 4-3. Well, that's interesting. It should be 4-4, but Amy Coney Barrett wasn't on it, and neither was Kavanaugh. Why is that? Why did they not want to get involved in those? Now, Amy Coney Barrett and Kavanaugh, if this appeal is granted certiorari, if it comes into the Supreme Court, then we're going to see how they rule on those things. Lava Java Lava says, do you know what negative effects of removing Article 230 could have or could result on social media? So yeah, we did cover Article 230 here on the program, went through the statute, explained why it was in effect. It was written forever ago. I mean, like 2 decades ago. And largely this was put in place to protect new companies from being sued, from having liability. So the theory was if you're Facebook and you have a bunch of people publishing stuff, somebody posts something that's copyrighted, somebody posts something that's defamatory. Well, Facebook doesn't want to get sued because I went on Facebook and said so-and-so is a piece of garbage, right? They don't want liability from that. That liability should go to me. And so Section 230 carved out this little exclusion for these big web companies and said, you're not allowed to sue them anymore because they're not publishers. They're just like a phone company. If you pick up the phone and call somebody and you say some nasty things and the other and somebody hears that call, you don't sue the phone company. They weren't responsible for the content of that phone call. They're just responsible for making the connection. So they're exempt from liability. Same concept with Facebook. Now, the issue now is that Facebook is almost acting like a publisher. Same with Twitter. Same with a lot of these major companies where they're saying, okay, we're going to let you have some content on our platform, but we're going to start censoring it. We saw this on Twitter. They're going to start literally deleting or censoring certain tweets and certain content. Well, now that changes the equation a bit because now they're not the phone company anymore, just making the connection between a user and a publisher. Now they're actually getting in the middle. They're getting involved in that conversation. They're saying, well, that conversation is a little bit bad. You can't say those words. You can't share that link. You can't retweet that comment. They're acting as a publisher now in the same way that somebody who works for the Washington Post has editorial control over the material that is being published. So, you know, you can't, if you work at the New York Times, you can't just hop on their front page and say whatever you want. You have a lot of people who are vetting that information and sort of curating that content before it goes out. So you can sue the New York Times because they are a publisher. Now they have a very high threshold. You have to prove, defamation is not an easy claim to prove, but it still is a little bit different. Now that Facebook and Twitter are acting almost like publishers, many people are saying that Section 230 protections should be removed. They should make them more liable for their activities. It's a good question, Lava Java. And on that point, I did see that Donald Trump is basically making this new defense bill contingent upon some action on Section 230. And I've been very skeptical that there's going to be any action on Section 230 or any progress from any of our people in government. So far, we've seen a number of our current senators and House representatives haul these different big social media tycoons in front of them. We've seen it from Mark Zuckerberg. We've seen it with Jack Dorsey over at Twitter. Some of the Google people have come in there. And they don't have any qualms about literally lying directly to Congress, literally lying. They just say whatever they want. No, I have no knowledge of that. No, we weren't doing anything like that. No, I have no idea. That's a senator. That's not part of our process. I'll have to look into that. Full of garbage, every one of them. And the Congress people, they don't know anything. You have Congress people asking, well, what is a like and what is a share? These people are so antiquated and out of touch with anything that's related to technology. It's just a big show. It's just a big, they have to haul themselves in there, answer a bunch of questions from some octogenarians who have no idea what the technology is. And of course, there's no accountability at all. And Google, Facebook, and Twitter, they know they're essentially more powerful than these government bodies are. They can do whatever they want, and they have them all in their pockets anyways. They donate to all of their campaigns. They all have mega funding, and none of these politicians, they don't want to anger the Google gods or the YouTube gods or the Facebook gods because that is going to impact their next election, and they want to regain power. So the idea that we're going to see a bunch of our elected people go in and hold these mega corporations accountable, in my mind, is laughable. I think that there's probably going to be needing to be a new generation of politicians, people who understand how this stuff works and people who really want to go in there without the ties to these companies, who just say, I'm not going to take that Facebook money. I'm not going to take that Twitter money. Here's what I'm going to get elected for, and I need you to vote for me to get me into office. That's how we're going to see some changes. But the idea that we have these current people in office that are going to do anything about Section 230, I highly doubt it. But we will see. All right. We have Mark Kunjan, who says Dominion already hacked and you can find everything on the darknet. It took under 2 minutes to hack Dominion. That is the truth. Yeah, we saw an article. We saw a statement from Sidney Powell in one of her lawsuits where she was explaining specifically that there was a professor, I think from Princeton or somewhere, some Ivy League school, who hacked a Dominion machine with 7 minutes and a screwdriver. And he wrote that in a paper. She put it in a court motion. And so it sounds pretty simple. Doesn't sound super complicated. All right, we have Eagle Eye Gardens. Yes, Rob, they spew from their mouths. I keep hitting on Ted Cruz 230. That comes from Dean Bob. Dean Bob, we have Alan Fox. You said, why did my comment get deleted? So Ma says, listen, we have rules up there in the pinned message above. Yeah, so some channel rules, of course. We want to make sure that everybody's being friendly, that there's not anything spammy. We want this to be like a conversation that we're having around a dinner table with friends. Friendly, productive, enjoyable. I know these are heated conversations, but you can have a heated conversation at a dinner table. You don't need to start yelling epithets. I'm not saying that you did that, Alan. I'm just saying in general. We want it to be productive, and so we have some rules. All right, we have Samantha Richardson who says, Rob isn't biased against Trump. He just reads the facts, 100% facts. If the facts don't fit, what do you want to hear? So what? He doesn't seem to hate Trump from my point of view. No, I don't hate Trump at all. I don't think that at all. We have some other questions. Another one from McCain's Revenge. I like to take McCain's Revenge's questions because he's usually unhappy with what we're having to say here. He says, Rob, what are your thoughts on the top law enforcement official, AG Barr, saying no fraud proven as of yesterday? So McCain's Revenge, I actually haven't seen that. And I thought that they walked that back today a little bit. I saw the headline and then I saw a walk back. And so I don't really know what the full story is on that. But I will take a look at it. Certainly, if Bill Barr doesn't think that there's any fraud going on, I think that's interesting, right? You should take that into consideration. Certainly. We have Paul Fun who says, yeah, 2 minutes. Someone said so. The dark side reversed the result. It sounds reasonable. We have, let's see. Did the Germany raid happen from same 1673? I don't know on that. A lot of people have said that it is, but I have not seen anything confirmed. So at this point, I would say it's probably not confirmed. But again, why would the FBI or any of the federal security agencies confirm that for us? They certainly wouldn't. We have Grayson BR who says, started watching R&R and reviewing the police actions this last summer. Thanks for keeping American thinking about matters and stressing the importance of being objective. Yeah, I appreciate that. That's a nice comment. Thank you so much, Grayson. Appreciate you being here and thanks for being with us for so long. The channel has changed dramatically. We're talking about all sorts of, interesting topics that are really resonating with a lot of people. And so I'm grateful that you're here and thanks for that nice message. We have some other one. Diabolus Musica says, Trump planned this nonsense for months right in front of your eyes, and now you act surprised. Martin says, where is Bill Barr? We have Dale Power who says, confirmed Germany raid. Could not confirmed on the Germany raid. It could be a psyop. Some other questions. Bill Barr has stated the challenges are civil court matters. The R&R Law Group Conspiracy Hour. That comes from Wills 25. The conspiracy stuff I think is pretty funny. People are very critical about people who want to have conversations about these types of issues. And I think that they're entitled to that opinion. They can say that it's conspiracy theories or it's conspiratorial or whatever it is. What we're doing on this channel is we're having conversations about these claims. We're presenting evidence. We've read through dozens of affidavits on this program. And there's a lot of information out there about potential election fraud. And by the way, according to the Reuters Ipsos poll, 39% of Americans are starting to kind of agree with that. We talked about a Rasmussen poll yesterday that said even 30% of Democrats think that. So the real question is, are we in the conspiracy side anymore? Is this conversation, is this idea about questioning the integrity of our elections, about holding our government officials accountable? Should we just trust everything that the government says? Should we just trust our Secretary of State and all of the politicians who largely are incompetent everywhere else and everything else they do and touch, but this they're perfect on? This election is pretty good, pretty okay. I'm going to color myself skeptical. I'm going to remain skeptical. I'm not so sure it's a conspiracy anymore. I think there's enough evidence here that really the people who are continuing to deny that there's any voter fraud at all, those people feel like the conspiratorial people to me. They're the ones who are taking a look at evidence that's being presented all around the country and saying, I'm going to bury my head in the sand on this thing. I'm just going to not talk about it. And largely, regardless of where you're at on this issue, whether you think it's a conspiracy theory or not, the point is, the only thing we're trying to accomplish on this program is to have conversations about it. And I think it's important. I think it's valuable to the country as a whole. There are a lot of people who are going to be unhappy regardless of what happens here. But if we can help maybe just shed some light on how some of this stuff works, what the lawsuits look like, what the arguments look like, what the Democratic response looks like, what the judges are saying, then we can sort of take some of the power out of the real conspiracy theories, the stuff that people are really running with that is totally unfounded. We've had some of those claims on this program. We've analyzed them and we said, that's not so good. That's kind of explained by this other alternative theory. But there are some things that stick, and talking about them and dissecting them and analyzing them is more useful in my mind than just telling 74 million Americans to shut their mouths, sit down, shut up, and enjoy the Joe Biden presidency. That is not an effective way to run a country. It's not good for the Joe Biden presidency. It's not good for that administration. It's not good for the country. It will be ungovernable. So what we're trying to do here is just add some help to the conversation, open up a forum where we can talk about these things, and maybe add a little bit of insight into how some of this stuff works. But I understand if you want to call it a conspiracy theory, that's fine. You're welcome to do that. I appreciate you being here anyways. All right. We have a couple other questions. Tell me this. Trump has won 0 lawsuits. Biden cheated. We have Joanne Young who says, I think the Democrats pushed the game to come out with a lot of legwork and campaigning around the country. I think that's probably true. Zorro says ungovernable sounds pretty good to me. Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with a pause on some of that governance going on because largely it's ineffective anyways. All right. All right, my friends. Well, let's wrap it up there. I want to thank you so much for being a part of the program. As a reminder, if you're not a regular on this channel, we go live every day at this time. So now's a good time to subscribe. And we want to have you back. That's why it's important that you do so and you hit that notification bell so that when we do go live, your phone or your computer alerts you and you come join the program. Also a good time to hit that like button. Unfortunately, a lot of people really sort of dislike some of the comments on the program and it makes it hard to share or to help other people find the content. So hitting the like button helps it show up in the recommended next video or the suggested video box. We would appreciate that. We also have the Discord server where our chat takes place both before and after the program. We are going to put a copy of our slides into the Discord server at the end of the program so you can take a look at those and see all of the different material that I presented today. I also have one final ask that if you know anybody in the state of Arizona, somebody who's been charged with a crime, that's what my day job is. That's what my team and I do. We're very passionate about it. We're very good at it. We give our clients the best representation. We're very aggressive. We like to win, but we like to be reasonable attorneys, and as long as that's in the best interest of our clients. And so we'd be very honored if you would send them our way. We'll take very good care of them, and a referral from you would mean the world to us. So I want to thank you once again for being a part of the show. I want to wish everybody a very wonderful evening, a nice restful sleep, and I will see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.